Hello and welcome to another First Contact here in the diplomatic division of Live Long and Podcast. Tonight we are making first contact with a couple of comic book creators who are meeting the first time in person here tonight.
Indeed. What an extra treat.
Indeed. Christopher Sequeira and Joe Eisma.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Creators of the very recent Star Trek Holo-ween, which I have here, which, my background is messing with. That's cool.
That's
there
psychedelic.
We go.
It's haunted.
It is. Yeah. They're real comics, though, not holographic comics or whatever they look like here.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. We are your hosts, Davan and Dave, aka Plain Simple Tailors.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet you both. Welcome. Yeah. So we're truly using the infosphere to our advantage tonight because we're meeting from the future, the present, and the past. Thursday, over in Australia, and then here on the Atlantic coast, and then somewhere even further into the past out in Texas.
Yeah,
which is great. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to see you. Really enjoyed the issues, first of all.
So thank you very much.
Thank you for getting them out there. Is this your first time working together?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Right on.
Well, I think it was a successful collaboration. So what are your guys', we will start with Christopher. What are your guys' origins with Star Trek? Like, do you have to be a Star Trek nerd to like write Star Trek comics? I'd assume it's a prerequisite. I don't know.
I think it helps. What happened in my case? I've been a fan, particularly of the Next Gen, but I do love the original series as well. But particularly the Next Gen and everything that came after that, and everything that's still going on now. But with this comic, I had actually pitched something else to IDW, and I will say it was Star Trek related. And it was given a green light. It was going to go ahead, and it involved another property from somewhere else, and it was initially green lit, but then it hit an obstacle, and it may be dead for all time, or it may not be. But what happened was I was talking to Heather, the lady at IDW, and I said, did I pitch something else at some future point in time? And she very kindly said yes. And at the appropriate time, I think I gave her 3 other 1-paragraph or 1-sentence ideas. And I said, any of these be any good? And she came back to me, and I think it was just like really fast. I think it was like a week later, and she said something like, Paramount said we're doing ID number 2. I went, what? We are, and that was this one. It was the Holo-ween thing, and it went from there.
Nice.
So I have more questions about that, but what about your origins in Star Trek, Joe?
Well, definitely all my life. I'm 45, so it's been in my life for a long time because my late father was a huge nerd. And that's kind of how I got into it. So like my very first experience with Star Trek, I have 2 kind of touchstones with Star Trek. One was my mom took me to see Wrath of Khan when I was like 3 or 4. And the scene with the
wow.
Yeah, I like freaked the hell out in the theater, made a scene, and she had to take me out of the theater. So that was my first impression of Star Trek. But I still liked it when I would watch it later. But then my dad was a huge Next Gen fan. And like he would literally, again, I'm dating myself here. He would tape them on video cassette and we would watch them all the time because, you know, we didn't have streaming. And so it was Next Gen. That was like my big thing for a long time because that was something my dad and I could bond over. And yeah, it's just kind of carried through. I've kind of gone in and out a little bit. Like I kind of dropped off at the end of Next Gen for a little bit. I didn't check out Deep Space Nine until later, which became like my all-time favorite for a long time. Until Worlds, because
it's great.
Yeah, Captain Pike is kind of like my hero. I kind of aspire to his hair a little bit, but
me too. I just don't do it.
But yeah. So Next Gen was just—it's always been like a huge thing for me anyway. So I was really glad to be able to do this, and so And not to get too schmaltzy here, but like for me, like what was so exciting about this was like to do something that I know my dad would have enjoyed, you know? Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, it's a classic like holodeck mishap
Yeah.
episode, you know. It's up there with the other ones with Robin Hood, and like it's really good. And I love Universal Monsters too. So like throwing all that together. So, Christopher, did you like pitch the Red Jack and everything, or you just like I want to do a Star Trek Holo-ween story, or you had it all kind of thought out?
One of my other main interests is horror fiction. I've written quite a lot. I've commissioned and edited collections of horror stories, and I'm known as a bit of a fan of the old mashup. I did a collection a couple of years ago called Caped Fear, Superhuman Horror Stories, and it was horror stories that had to involve a superhero. And we had a Neil Gaiman story, and Mark Waid wrote the introduction. So I used all my comic book connections and two of my big loves and threw those together. And love horror fiction, love the Universal Monsters, love the classic literary original things that all those things come from. And I'm also a bit of a Jack the Ripper buff as well, because I'm a Sherlock Holmes fan, so I'm absolutely obsessed with all details of Victorian crime fiction and real true life Victorian crime, that being the famous one. So I really remembered the Robert Bloch written Wolf in the Fold Trek episode, and I thought holodeck monsters, it's got to be that guy coming back. It's got to be him coming back somehow, and that's got to be the big bad, and I've got to make that work.
Well, I think like with the original series, like it did well for its time, but I think there's a lot you can do with that character that they couldn't do on that show. And like it's a good character to reach for a horror story too, I think. Now, were you familiar with this story when you wrote that story?
That's the Data one. Yeah.
The Data one. Yeah.
Now, I'd read it, and once when it came out, I think, and I actually forgot about it when I came to do this. How, I don't know, and or it might have been half forgotten, but also I might have been thinking, because it was a DC comic, they won't want it in the continuity of this, so I'll just treat it as if it wasn't there. And then when we got into the script for issue 1, even well after it was approved and the outline was rolling, Paramount came back with a note saying, and Heather as well, so came back with a note, and they said, you can reference this if you like, and maybe we should. And I said, whatever you want to do. And I said, we can tweak everything that's in issue 1 and make it that the events of that one count. So that's the way we did it in the end.
Right.
I think that's a good idea. It adds to the headcanon. And I find Star Trek comics slide into the headcanon really nice because they're not as intrusive as like the novels where they'll like change so much about a certain character. You have to really believe in that story to throw that into your headcanon. But comics always slide in very nicely.
And after that happened, that decision was made. Heather sent me a PDF copy of that old issue, and I read it again really closely, just to make sure that none of the sort of action beats or payoff character interplay beats that we were doing were a complete copy of that. If there was a scene where two characters met in that, I tried to make it play out differently and all that.
Right.
Well, definitely you use different main characters for sure. Like this one's more like a Data Beverly story, and you kind of take almost Data off the board in your story pretty quickly.
Yes, rather dramatically. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do that. Any time you get to see a sort of Yorick moment that way with Data is I mean, chef's kiss, right? One of the things I really loved about this was, turning to art for a moment, was the way that, and I assume this is intentional, but my question is sort of like chicken and egg here. the way in which the holodeck allows us to sort of recover ourselves in various ways, you take that right into the flesh of the characters with, you know, the classic surgical alteration or that sort of thing that happens to them over the course of the story. And even, you know, to Data a little bit. To me, that's like a way of taking Halloween costumes and like going even closer than body paint, you know? Was that, so did that start with the sense of Data being taken off the board, or was getting those characters into that sort of physical presentation of sort of monstrousness like the plan right from go?
Yeah, I'll let Chris take that one.
Yeah, it was the plan right from go. But look, one of the things I got to tip my imaginary fedora to Mr. Eisma here. I mean, because you've got to visually depict them in a comic, and they've got to look like the monsters whose identities they're adopting, but he's still got to make them look like the actors underneath. And he killed it. He absolutely killed it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the splash page of issue 4, where it was our first chance to do a close up of all 4 of the guys in the monster guises in close up on a full splash. You know, they look great, but they all, even more, you know, under layers of green gills and scales, they look exactly like the characters you know and love. That page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And just killed it. And yeah, Joe was just amazing. It was just like, I was having fits when the pages were coming back in. They were just so cool.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what's funny? What I'll say is, when I started this, Heather Antos, we really have to give praise to Heather Antos for kind of spearheading this whole thing. You know, she and I worked together on a book previously, so she kind of was familiar with me and she knew kind of what I could do. So she gave me some real general descriptions of what was going to happen, because I guess Chris's script wasn't totally ready yet. Mm-hmm. And so I did these sketches of combining the characters, and I hope like when they do the trade, they put these sketches in there with it, because like some of the characters that I did were like totally different. Like I think Riker I did as Dracula, and Data was still Frankenstein, and I can't remember what the other ones were, but it was really fun. It was just totally different. But the thing that, and I mentioned this when I was in New York Comic-Con on the panel, was like, you know, yes, they're loosely based on the Universal monsters. We can't really say that because Universal is pretty litigious. So we're like, they're kind of based on these monsters that you were probably familiar with. But
yeah,
we kind of tiptoe a little bit on that.
Well, and you made the monster from the Black Lagoon like a Klingon thing. You're like, right? This is actually just like a Klingon creature.
Yeah, I mean, and that was one. That was one we had to be really careful with. And what I did in the original script and proposal was I said there'd be a water-breathing character evocative, perhaps, of H.P. Lovecraft's Shadows over Innsmouth.
Right.
And the deep ones that were the characters there, that were the Gill people. But Worf was there, and I thought, this is even better. I'll make up a Klingon aquatic creature myth that parallels Holo-ween. And it's sort of better because it brought in a bit of, you know, the classic Star Trek alien culture. It can't be just Holo-ween. Mm-hmm. There's all these other races on the ship. And so we just had a bit of dialogue where Worf mentions this early on in issue 1, and it sets up, okay, that's an obvious parallel as far as he's concerned in his culture. So that's what we'll make him turn into. So it sort of worked, and you know, and we got to pay tribute to Creature from the Black Lagoon, obviously, but without, you know, it being necessarily that.
Yeah, it was really clever the way you did that. You made it its own thing, but it's still kind of a touchstone for us that we kind of recognize what that is. But
we tried a few careful steps here and there, and that's why I gave him like a 3-pronged thing I called a trilith that Joe designed, that Joe drew, because basically I thought, is he like a snorting, monstrous, not thinking kind of aquatic creature? And I thought, no, we want to get away from Creature from the Black Lagoon. Let's make it that they're thinking monsters, and Klingons are all about battle and everything, and I thought a trident sort of shaped bat'leth would evoke Atlantis and Namor and Aquaman and all that kind of jazz. So I sort of that's where I got that. It was just putting those bits together, but making him that bit less creature from the Black Lagoon, like just that little notch.
Actually, staying on Worf for the moment, I have to say one of the things that I found really delightful about these issues was Worf's clear irritation, both in the text, he's just yelling in Klingon, and in the visuals about being in any kind of costume at all.
Oh yeah,
like he's just. I was looking at his face through these issues, thinking like, I am not a merry man, you know.
Classic.
Yeah, of course, the irritation works for him in this context.
Yeah, I mean, you can't completely. You can change his appearance, but you can't change who he is. Really, I mean, he has to have Worfisms, you know.
Oh, we love Worfisms.
Has to try and pop the balloon somehow, right? Yeah.
No,
look,
Joe.
That's another Joe's strength. You know, the acting, the characters acting. Yeah, that's crucial to make the thing pay off as well.
It's true. Like you have to, like, yeah. I mean, you have, for the writing and art, you have to sort of do Picard, but it's Picard doing somebody else, and like that's a whole nother layer. That's very interesting. Now, Joe, when you first heard you were going to do this story, you're like, as an artist perspective, it's just like, yes, a holodeck, story, because there's so much you can do there.
Oh yeah,
than a typical Star Trek story where it's just people standing on the bridge or
Oh my god, it's so exciting. And I mean, we do have our scenes of them standing on the bridge. Don't get me wrong.
but we love bridges, like
right. But I love the holodeck. I love holodeck stories anyway because like the imagination just runs wild and you can do kind of anything. And I loved, having the scenes in Victorian England or whatever, or our version of it, whatever. Because I mean, I love that era too. I love From Hell by Alan Moore. That's one of my favorites, and I love that era. So I was like, oh man, I get to draw Star Trek plus this. This is so exciting. So yeah, everything about this, when I got to read like the script and everything, I was like, oh, this like really scratches a lot of itches, But
our review team over when we reviewed the issues really loved your Deanna design as the mummy.
Oh, thank you.
Like I could put a poster of that on my wall.
Well, I wanted to do something different than just have her just wrapped. I wanted to give her the headdress, and I looked at a couple of different headdress references and everything, and I decided to go with the one that I went with just to kind of give her some contrast because she's got this like billowy hair, and give her some kind of verticality a little bit. So just to contrast with that. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
Yeah, really good. I can just imagine Marge Simpson's hair underneath that thing too, if I want. So it's nice to leave a little something to the imagination.
Sure.
Spoiler alerts, by the way. If everyone go read these issues, buy them and then read them.
Yes.
But I thought tying together Red Jack and this particular Star Trek villain here was a genius idea. My God, why did you don't like Armistice?
Luckily, your background is not giving any spoilers at all.
No, it's not. So
the internet saves us again.
Yeah, but I thought that was genius because they're both Star Trek characters that feed off of fear, and very Halloween.
When I had that flash of memory, it was like, oh, got to find a way to do this somehow. And we debated. No spoilers for people who haven't read it, because how and what Armis is in our story is its own thing. But we debated all different ways of doing that, including, just let me say, the obvious way of doing it, and we went with the way that we did it instead. And I think that was the right call, given the amount of space that we had to tell that story. And he came in last quarter, really, rather than earlier on. If it was different structure to the story and he was in there earlier, we might have gone a different route with him. That's all I'll say on that one. But we did think the options through.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting with holodeck because you can just throw so much in there. You almost have to like have restraint to be like, no, okay, I can't get carried away with this holodeck story.
Right.
We can't have Q showing up as the Sheriff of Nottingham in this story. It'd be pretty fun too. Yeah, that's the sequel. Well, speaking of sequels, one thing that this image here made us really want to hear over on the review was that bottom right image of Picard, Beverly, Phantom of the Opera. If you guys could collaborate now again on that story for next Halloween.
Look, if they ask me to do anything more, I'm there in a heartbeat. If they'll have me, whether it's a sequel to this or anything else, I'm like Joe. It's a franchise I love a lot. I at San Diego Comic-Con, I was on a panel for IDW, and what came to my lips was, it's the greatest ensemble cast in science fiction. And it's an ensemble concept, whatever season you're talking about. And so, yeah, if a chance comes my way to do anything again, would love to do. Would I love to do more macabre tinged takes? And yeah, absolutely. Whether it's trying to figure out what to do with that salt vampire from the original series or whatever. I'd love to try and knit some ideas together. But when Trek does horror, which it did occasionally, like with Red Jacket, Wolf in the Fold, like with that conspiracy episode of Next Gen, to which there's never been a sequel,
Right.
or a full explanation of those disgusting aliens. Okay, just put that out there.
That thread's been dangling for a long time.
Yeah. And even Kirk's brother got killed by these weird sort of vampire-like, bat-like aliens in the original series. When they do horror, it works really well because you've got these people of reason and science grappling with, just outright fear, whether it be scientific in nature or a bit more weird and ethereal. So you always get really interesting stuff happening.
Even like body horror with like the Borg and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that moves me to one of the other things I wanted to pick up on. I know we're beginning to get short on time here, but just quickly, Deanna Troi, in terms of this being like an ensemble cast, Deanna Troi plays a really key role in that. Was it important for you in this to make sure that she did that? Like, do you have a peculiar interest in Deanna as a character, or is that more narrative, just function? Like, it really works well to have her sort of play that key function here.
I just thought she, with her empathic nature, it had to be her as the point of view protagonist.
Sure.
Just so many more levels of the fear element because she's feeling everyone else's fear. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good choice anyway, because I always say with characters like Beverly and Deanna, they didn't get a lot of work to work with in the series. So anything you can kind of add to their character arc is always welcome, I find. Like,
and
some people have nitpicked the way they went with her in Picard season 3, but I'm like, no, it's great. It's more they've ever given her to work with. I don't care if it's a little like crazy, but go with it. It's more Beverly. And so I thought that was pretty great. Joe, so as a TNG fan, is it easier or harder to draw these characters that you know so well and you've looked at so much, like as real people?
Yeah, it's really stressful. Just because, like, I want to honor them too. I want to make sure that they look right, because as a fan, I want to be able to open the book and say, okay, that's Deanna and that's Data, and I don't want to be like, this guy doesn't know who he's drawing, whatever. So, like, I had so many tabs open on my computer, and I had episodes like on my iPad playing, like, and I pause all the time just so I would make sure that I'd have like their faces up while I was drawing. Because it's really like getting the likeness was right. Was really important to me, and it's very important to IDW and to Paramount too. Because there was a few times I'd have to like go back and try a little bit more refinement on this likeness, see if you can get it, and it's totally fair. But as a fan, yeah, you want to get it right, but also as a professional, you don't want to let anybody down. I don't want to let the readers down. So that was definitely the most challenging part of this entire project, was making sure that the likenesses were as close to spot on as possible. But also it felt nice and kind of reassuring because of the fact that I grew up watching these characters, so I was like, it's kind of like just kind of in a way transported me back to my childhood when I'm just watching them on TV, and now I get to portray them. I get to kind of direct them myself, on the page.
Yeah.
It's your work on this spooky edition of Star Trek was a delightful read there, gentlemen, from the World Mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eamon.
Well, and do we have anything further for these guys here, Dave? Or should we let them get back to their wonderful creative ventures? Well, you know what? There's one thing I do want to say. You guys together nailed Reg Barkley. Like,
oh yeah,
you're saying about having to nail
what
the
a great
likenesses.
point.
Just this random guy and a lieutenant, could be anybody running in there, but it's so clearly Reg, and everything he says is so clearly Reg. It's just like, oh yeah, there's some funny stuff.
Both his physical mannerisms and his dialogue were there.
Reg was in my original outline, not with a major part, and one of the notes that came back on just the outline was, "Oh, great, Reg, can we do more with him?" And I went, "Okay," and I gave him more things to do that affected different points in the plot. So that was purely response to notes, and it was a really good call and a really good suggestion.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how much he was in the script too. I was like, oh, like I never would have thought to even imagine that he would play such, a role in this, and because he's always been kind of like more of a background type player in so many things. And yeah, so it was really nice that Chris put him in the role.
Look, as I say, got to thank Heather and the Paramount crew. Yeah. And it was like, and again, when it was one of those ones where, right, the most fearful character in the series should have something to do with it. Yeah, that's crucial in motivation in a story that's all about fear. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, I thought you did a great job capturing the way he kind of almost collapses in on himself when he's like, oh no, I have to interact with someone.
I had to hunt down all the Reg episodes and watch them.
That's right.
Those are fun.
Now that's when Star Trek does awkward at its best. That moment when they first go into the holodeck and find themselves. Oh, just brutal.
Nice.
Well,
and I also thought how you tied the MacGuffin. Like, there's always the MacGuffin that saves the day in the end in Star Trek, whether it's science-based or whatever. I love how you guys made it kind of lore and character-based, which I thought was a nice element, because it's easy kind of to just throw a Geordi comes up with the idea and saves the day kind of ending, and it was deeper than that, and I really appreciated that.
Cool. Thank you.
That was really satisfying.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I hope that kind of conveys to y'all and to our readers that, this is a project that was made by fans. It's not just a job. Like, we're both fans of this property, and we're both like have like a sense of, fondness and care for it. So if we can elicit that kind of reaction, then I feel like we've succeeded. So.
Well, I think you've succeeded for sure.
I certainly think so.
And something you can break out and read every Halloween.
Yay.
Indeed.
And, watch the Red Jack episode of TOS, read this comic, and then read Holo-ween and make it like a trilogy. It's like the ongoing story of Red Jack.
Settle in with your popcorn, wash your hands, then read the comic books.
Settle in with a little Jack the Ripper.
That's right.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys.
Indeed.
I can't wait to learn more about you guys over on Graphic Histories sometime here in the near future.
Thank you.
Well, it's been lovely to meet you. Lovely to bring you together for the first time.
Yes.
And Joe, I got to try and get over to the States and get to a con where you are one day, mate.
Yeah, well, I gotta get to Australia. I'm like, I would love to go there.
All right. Well, look, next time I'm talking to local convention organisers down there, I'll go, hey, why don't you pay to bring Joe Eisma out in?
All right, yeah, that works.
We'll give get both of you guys up here to Nova Scotia, or maybe
right.
somewhere's close but bigger.
Yeah.
But,
Trek-related solidarity. That's it.
Excellent.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we just have one more thing to say. End transmission.
Oh, I could
Live long and prosper. Yeah.